Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. It's always wonderful when an artist finds their way, but it's even more of an inspiration when they build a road for others to follow. That's our guest today. Adrian Mitchell is a dancer who is wanting to open those doors for other dancers to be able to have the same opportunity. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Okay, you are an incomparable professional dancer, but it actually started in a very sweet and compelling way. Not so good at sports, kind of like mom sent you to dance, but it was a performance of the Nutcracker that kind of really flipped the switch for you. What happened in that performance event that made you say, this is for me?
Yeah, my mom put me in ballet. She wanted me to be active. And first I started with actually other styles of dance, with some hip hop and jazz. And I have to admit that there was a girl in the ballet class that I wanted to be closer to. And so I started taking the ballet classes, and then totally got hooked on ballet and fell in love with the art form, and ever since have just been in love with ballet, classical dance. And yeah.
But you were, you were a little older when you really started getting into the professional thing. You were at 16?
Yeah. Ballet's hard, especially in America. There's a lot of certain ideas about it, misconceptions and perceptions that people have of what it means to be a male ballet dancer. So there was a lot of, unfortunately, bullying in school, and it was just difficult. So I stopped for quite a while, and we moved around a lot, and I took a big kind of hiatus from the art. And then when I turned 13, I really got dug back in and got myself on the professional track. But for an art form where usually dancers are starting at like 10 years old, I was so far behind. So it was a lot of catching up, a lot of hard work, which eventually took me to schools around the world, and to get there.
But I have to actually mention one school that you went to,
Yes.
Because it was a pivotal moment in my life. And this is not about me, but I have to say that I almost fell out of my chair when I read this. You studied with Gelsey Kirkland.
I did, yes.
And Gelsey Kirkland and Mikhail Baryshnikov were, two peas in a pod. I saw them in the Nutcracker when I was young, and I was just transformed. But you got to study with Gelsey Kirkland.
Yeah, I was in the first class of her school that she opened up in New York, which doesn't exist at the moment, but it was a few years, and it was a really unique training experience. Gelsey's such an artist, an incredible ballerina, a dramatic ballerina, and a lot of our training was in acting, and my career as a dancer was a lot of dramatic roles. And working with her, it gave me such a different perspective on what it means to be a dancer. The side of being an athlete is well known, that it's a lot of technical prowess and intense training that goes into the process of becoming a dancer. But not a lot of people understand that you're also an actor and an artist, and you have to be able to speak to an audience of sometimes thousands. So working with her, she really trained us on both sides of that, of really being able to become artists and studying our roles and treating it the way that an actor would when they approach a new movie or play or whatever it might be.
Wow, okay. You mentioned being bullied as a young man, but in the world of ballet, looking around, were there challenges? Did you see many dancers like yourself? Did you see many dancers of color? Because we are here because you have a nonprofit, DanceInColor, which your story is so compelling that I probably buried the lead by not saying that, the reason we're here is because of DanceInColor, inspiring other young dancers of color to pursue the art. But did you find that internally within the ballet world to be somewhat, disconcerting?
Yeah, it was definitely hard to grow up without a lot of role models, or one or two dancers that really I could look at and they looked like me or similar to me. That made it possible in my head that I could become a dancer. So there was a big issue with that, and also with other students, classmates. Very rarely did I have other black dancers in my class. It was like if there was a black dancer in my class, it was like there was one, and we were very close because we were the only dancers of color. So that was hard, and the art form still has a long ways to go, but I think there's quite a few people that are really making the effort. I'm doing that through DanceInColor.
Okay, so along the road, you actually said, your professional career led you around the world, and ultimately you ended up in Russia.
Yes.
And one of the most prestigious dance companies in Russia. How did you get there, and what was that experience?
So my mom thought it was a weird kind of love of Russian culture and dance and art, like Dostoevsky and Pushkin, things that the average eighth grader wouldn't really be interested in.
Or be able to pronounce.
Yeah, I probably couldn't back then. But there was always that love of the dancers that were coming out of there. Of course, Nureyev and Baryshnikov. I mean, I don't think any young male dancer doesn't idolize Nureyev and Baryshnikov. And so I was invited by a man named Oleg Vinogradov, who, during the Cold War and after, when the Kirov Ballet was coming over on their tours, and that was kind of, at that point, one of the biggest cultural exchanges between the countries. It was run by Oleg Vinogradov. He was the director of the Kirov Ballet for over 20 years. And he and I met each other in Florida. He invited me to visit Russia as a guest performer just for a few weeks. And I was invited to join the graduating class of the Vaganova School. And I had been studying the Vaganova training method for a while, so I was very, adept at that. But to go there and study it, kind of from the source was such an amazing opportunity. And I was also, I was making history, although I didn't think about it until I was there, but making history as the first black graduate of the school, which has been around for over 250 years. So it was a special opportunity, and the training was kind of irreplaceable. It was such a special moment to be able to study at such a history dance institution. I couldn't pass it up. And then I graduated from Vaganova School and subsequently joined the Mikhailovsky Theater, which is one of the top three ballet companies in Russia, where we got to dance, a lot of incredible repertoire, which some of it you don't even get to perform or even see in America. So it was really a special opportunity and experience.
And life changed for you and your wife, who is
Yes.
also a breathtakingly gorgeous dancer,
Thank
with the war. And,
Yeah.
You've spoken, a lot of people experienced an enormous amount of tragedy and continue to do so with the war, but your lives changed.
Yeah.
How did you adjust in your mind's eye when you came back? Because you were raised here in Los Angeles, so
Yeah.
in essence, you're coming home. Your wife is not coming home.
Yeah.
She's coming to a brand new experience. But how has that been internally, and how have you been able to, realize that your life will not be the same, but you can choose the life you want?
Yeah. It was definitely extremely sad for us. And I always kind of mention that as hard as we had it, many people had it so much harder. But, we came to a place which was, for me, familiar, but I had never worked in Los Angeles. So it was a lot of people to meet, a lot of work to build, carve out a spot for myself in the industry, which in LA is not as robust as it is in Russia or New York or European countries. The dance industry, especially ballet, here is not as huge of a deal as it was in Russia, or even as New York as it would be. So it was hard. It was a lot of kind of trying to kind of create a path in uncharted territory. It was not a lot of just kind of filling spots and taking positions. So we had to really kind of figure out, what are we building here? Do we want to build it here? And having built DanceInColor with my co-founders since 2020, made it kind of some kind of nest that I had in LA of people and work. But yeah, it was definitely shocking to move back into such a contemporary place. LA is very hip, for lack of a better term. And there's great things about that. I think that's wonderful that it's so culturally relevant. But it was definitely a shock. And it was not a choice. So, of course it was a choice, but it was not the first choice. It was like all of a sudden we were just here. And as happy as we are, it was not what we expected. So it took a long time to kind of get settled and get our bearings. And
Why did you leave? I know you've been asked this a bazillion times, but why did you leave?
We left because a friend of mine said it so well, because something was happening that we couldn't stand for, and to stay would have been almost endorsing it or saying that it was okay, allowing it. And we had gotten pretty far in our careers in Russia, and we're already kind of thinking about leaving. We were in that space of like, okay, it's probably time for us to move on and live back closer to family and all of that. But when that happened, it was just kind of very easy to make the decision to go, and it happened very suddenly. I think it was like 48 hours. We had 7 years of our lives packed up and out. We have a little doggy who we took with us. So yeah, it was just all those things combined. We just couldn't we didn't even look at what was happening in Ukraine until we left. And after we left, it was such an emotional moment because we saw the destruction, and it was just and I couldn't bring myself to look at when I was in Russia. It was just too much to handle psychologically. And now we've done a lot of work with charities, performing for charities to support Ukraine and their efforts.
Actually, you're right. There have been a number of people who, like yourself, with artistic, remarkable talent and skills that have gotten together and done things to support a lot of organizations. But to your point about DanceInColor, these are friends of yours that heard you, saw you, and realized that there was something special that could happen with who you are, what you've done, and what you know. This is really a grassroots thing that has really blossomed. So what was the conversation that you had with your friends?
Well, when we were in the pandemic, and emotions were always high for everyone, and then you added on top of it the murder of George Floyd, and the subsequent uprising, huge cultural shift that happened after that. And my friend Jason and I, who is an incredible ballet teacher, who studied in St. Petersburg while I was there in the St. Petersburg Conservatory, we decided that we were going to go air all of our grievances on Instagram. And we were very, kind about it. And we just spoke about our experiences as two leading figures in this industry that are Black, and have worked in spaces where we were one of very, very few or the only person of color in the institution. And a friend of mine, Chelsea, who's a childhood friend, said, let's do something about that, and let's make a foundation or a scholarship fund. And it started off very kind of nonchalant. Oh yeah, we'll do a scholarship. And we got incredible support, and we are both very ambitious and wanted to really make a real change. Nothing that's just sort of on the surface. We wanted to make institutional, systemic change to the art form, and that's what we're working on. So we created DanceInColor, which provides grants and scholarships and free educational programs to young Black dancers, targeting underserved communities. And since 2020, we've been working pretty tirelessly to raise funds and build the programs that might allow young kids like I was to feel like they might have a chance to have a professional career in the professional ballet industry.
I know that ballet attracts a lot of young women, but as a 6'3", which, by the way, as a ballet dancer is pretty profound in and of itself. I mean, I think Baryshnikov is 5'2" or something. How are you trying to engage young men?
Yeah, so that's interesting. We have our free dance programs, and one of the ways I do it is the way that my own experience was that I started with hip hop and jazz, which for a young man are sometimes a bit more accessible or relatable, and then I sneak the ballet classes in. And something about the discipline of ballet is so, not only is it great for young men, but also they love doing it because they have structure. And I have in the school where I also teach at, and I'm the associate executive director of West Side School of Ballet.
Which is in Santa Monica.
Which is in Santa Monica, yeah. Another one of my major projects and tasks. We have a young men's program, and I'm the meanest teacher. I'll admit that. I studied in Russia, and it was harsh. I'll leave it at that. And I'm not mean, but I'm strict with the kids. I give them discipline, and they adore that. They are always asking, when am I going to teach? When are you teaching again? Because they love that part of their life that has structure and discipline, and they can apply themselves at a young age. And I think it's so important to offer that outlet, which is why sports is also a great option, just it wasn't in the books for me personally. But that's one thing that kind of makes a change in young male dancers. And it's hard to find them. You know, I'm in charge of the boys program at Westside, and you know, it is attracting young men into the art form is particularly difficult, but also so important. I just trained, along with this faculty at Westside, 3 young men, which are going to the Royal Ballet School in London, the American Ballet, the JKO School in New York City, and the San Francisco Ballet School. 3 of the top schools in the world. And now they're leaving, so we're trying to kind of build that up, and I am able to do that with DanceInColor by doing recruiting at our free dance programs. We just had one the last July, and we were able to recruit 3 young men from that. And it's great, you know, to be able to do that, but difficult.
You know, you say that you were no good at sports necessarily, but ballet is, and dance at large, is an incredibly athletic skill. I immediately think of Gene Kelly, who of course you know, really demonstrated that you know, dance is a man's realm and a man's world. You know, took Fred Astaire was sort of the ballroom thing, and then Gene kind of jumped in with the athleticism. There's a lot of strength and athleticism that go into. So is there a misconception as to what it is like to be a male ballet dancer that still needs to be pushed off the table?
I think so, definitely. I think first, Gene and Fred are like, you know, a lot of the ballet dancers you ask. I think it was George Balanchine. What's your favorite, or maybe Baryshnikov? Who's your favorite dancer? And he said Fred Astaire. Because, you know, you'd think he'd say a ballet dancer, but Fred and Gene were incredible icons for male dancers. But I think, you know, my mother works in sports, and she oftentimes gives athletes a ballet class, not herself, but she brings in a teacher. And they're always shocked at how hard it is, because it takes so much balance, it takes so much coordination, it takes so much strength, both in the upper and lower body. So they're always surprised how athletic it really is. And you know, I think that's important that people know that it's, you know, as beautiful, as graceful and elegant as it is, and as emotionally, you know, stimulating it is as an artist, it is equally as difficult as you know, as it is emotional. It's extremely difficult athletically, and as far as strength, it takes an insane amount of strength. I'll say that.
Okay, I'm glad you used the word emotional, because I've always wanted to ask you this question, because I've seen you dance with your wife after the rain, which makes me cry. I mean, and it's a very poignant, just breathtakingly beautiful relationship on stage. So when you're out there dancing something like that, even though, you know, you've got someone in front of you who you obviously have an emotional attachment to, is the emotion of it as important as the movement, or are you concentrating on making sure that you're not going to drop her?
You know, we practice, the amount of hours that we practice, when we go on stage, you just kind of don't forget about it, but you let it go. You've done what you can, and you're not going to fix anything on stage. So that's when you come from an emotional place. You kind of let the soul take over or lead the dance at the point of, you know, once you've mastered the technique of it, or mastered, I would say. We never really master it, as much as it may seem like we do. But you kind of have to let go, and you let your emotions kind of take you somewhere. And that's so special, because the audience feels that. And that is that journey that the audience and the performer take together. It's an incredibly beautiful relationship that they have in that moment of the artist kind of becoming vulnerable and opening their heart.
So the idea of teaching a young person to dance and giving them the opportunity to learn to dance, you know, not everyone is going to be you and travel the world, and not everybody is going to pursue a career in dance. But if in fact they want to, how is the world of dance when it comes to casting, when it comes to opportunities? You know, how hard was it for you to break through some or go through some challenges because you were a man of color versus, you know, someone standing next to you who, you know, looked like the stereotype of what we would have thought of being, you know, a dancer? So how is it? How is the world of dance now in terms of opportunities, and how was it for you, and how has it changed?
Yeah, it was. I had a very unique experience. I was in Russia, the only black male dancer in one of the major companies there. And and funnily enough, the only black female dancer was in the company with me for a few years. And so a lot of typecasting, of course. I played a lot of villains, but I was good at that, so that was okay. But yeah, it was definitely typecasting, but also for me personally, I think I got opportunities because of that, because I looked different and exotic, which is a word I hated. But I think in America it's harder. It's a lot of tokenizing. A lot of times there's one spot. I've heard that before. I've experienced that myself as when I was going to ballet schools, there was like, one spot for a young black dancer. So we have our young black dancer, and that was always it. I think that's changing. I hope that's changing. I'm surely working to make sure that changes. But that's what we have to look out for when it's like, oh, we need a black dancer. They take one, and then it needs to be much more equal opportunity and equitable. And to create equity, it means making sure that the playing ground is fair. And that's why we work with DanceInColor to create, at least financially, creating an equal playing ground for dancers of color that very possibly come from socioeconomic backgrounds that don't really support all of the financial costs that it takes to create a professional dancer.
It's hard enough to be a dancer. It's hard enough to have done what you have done already. But why did you turn around? Why are you reaching your hand back?
It was just, I remember the struggle that I went through, and I have a single mom who worked so hard to make sure I could have the training. And so I've experienced it firsthand. So to be able to provide the opportunity or to create some relief possibly for these young dancers is so incredibly rewarding. And when you get to see them blossom, it's an unreal experience when you get to see one of our scholars, she's winning competitions and performing, all over, and to be able to see it, it's, we knew why we did it. We started just because of what was happening culturally, and we wanted to be part of the change. And then why we're still doing it now is because when you see the effect that you can have on these young people who are, like you mentioned, becoming professional dancers or possibly not, it's still so rewarding. We call it at Westside, we call it grace and grit. Where even if you don't become a professional dancer, ballet training creates such a sense of discipline and a sense of self, which is so important to go into the real world. And that's why, the ballet training is great if you're going to become a professional dancer, but if you're not, there's still so much value in studying ballet. So we're kind of treating it that way where, we give these scholarships and we hope they become professional dancers, but even if they don't, we know that we've done something to better their lives.
How has your life been enhanced by your experience? Because you had to fight with the bullying, you had to, deal with the age gap that you hadn't started fast enough, you had to deal with all of these things. But why are you supportive of dance? You've just mentioned all these things that could happen to others, but how did it change you inside? What did dance make you versus what dance, the absence of dance, would have created in an Adrian?
Yeah. I think dance is the most organic form of communication and our most innate art form that is really internal. It's a natural thing to dance. So when I experienced it and I felt what it meant to portray emotion through movement, I began to understand myself. I was never good at school, and as I mentioned before, I wasn't great at sports. And when I learned how to apply myself in something that was so emotionally, that I connected with emotionally, I became better at other things. I just knew myself better. I kind of, I'm doing a lot of work now in administration, and all of that is in ballet, but I'm very interested in that side of the arts world that's not as just related, solely to ballet. And I was able to kind of see that perspective by discovering myself through dance, even if that sounds corny.
Not at all. No. I think it's imperative that your mission is so profoundly wonderful in so many different ways, and it's being recognized and noticed. You're getting a lot of support from people who are recognizable names and figures. I mean, I saw that Misty Copeland is one of your supporters. How are you hearing that people are supporting you, and what are you feeling? Are you feeling like this is a momentum that is building and building and building, and what has that been?
Yeah, It was fun. In the beginning, it was pretty easy. We kind of raised a good amount of money, and there was a lot of people behind us, and it was culturally just so relevant at that moment. And like all things, of course, it's faded a bit. Although there still is, in many institutions, a strong push to create more diversity and more access. But now it's really been kind of rolling up our sleeves, and we've put in that work, and we haven't given up. And there was times where it was easy to write checks to scholars, and times where it was harder, and we had to really scrap it together. But then after we kind of got over that hump, people like Misty was so nice to give a speech at our virtual gala. That was when we were still doing virtual galas before we could be in person, and but also that was also special. I'll go back to that we built it when we didn't have a lot else to do. And that was actually so opportune, of course. We always try and find the good in a terrible situation. So the fact that we were at home on Zoom, and even when I got back to work performing after the shows, because I was in St. Petersburg, and my colleagues are here in America, one in New York, one in Los Angeles. So I would go perform, and at 11 p.m. I would go on Zoom after my show. I'd go on Zoom so we could meet and discuss and budget and all that. But then we got through that tough time, and then people like Misty would speak at our gala, and we had some incredible people as supporters, both financially and also just sharing the name and the mission. So it's been special, and it's been definitely thanks to that support that we've gotten that we've been able to do what we've done so far, and that we're able to see what we're going to be able to do soon in the future.
I was going to say, and what are your plans? What are your hopes and dreams for DanceInColor?
Yeah, so we have this free program called Dance to Dreams, which is co-produced by Westside Ballet of Santa Monica and DanceInColor, and I work at both organizations, so it works perfectly that I can kind of bring them together, because Westside has the studios and the outreach, and we have all the experience with this. I call it IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility work. So we create this program where we offer them transportation, we give them lunch, and we teach them ballet. And so that's something that we're building out into weeks, and possibly considering having one in New York and one in Los Angeles. But then also just more scholarships. That's a major thing. And allowing and supporting these big institutions to get them to make more of an effort to become more diverse. So by providing scholarships to dance competitions and to dance schools that are endowed, which means that they're in perpetuity, they exist because there's a certain, it's a whole financial thing that allows them to live forever. And the goal is to get to that point where we can, until, who knows when, but for a very, very long time, that we'd be able to continue supporting dancers and building these programs that really can change the face of dance.
All right, and you still perform?
I do. I perform only when it's really fun, and that's what I want to do. Dancing is takes such a toll on your body, especially if you're doing it like I'm doing it intermittently. All of a sudden, it's time to get in shape for a show, and not physical shape, but like get your body, your legs, and your feet ready to go on stage. But we had the pleasure of working with Xander Parrish up in Orange County at the Segerstrom Center of the Arts to perform. And they've done some incredible dance programming. And ironically enough, we used to all tour down there when we worked in Russia. They used to bring the major Russian ballet companies. And now we go as a group of the dancers that have left Russia in response to the war. So that's been great. And whenever they ask, I go. But yeah, I've also been getting into administration, and I'm doing that through DanceInColor and through Westside, trying to also bolster Los Angeles's ballet community and footprint in the dance world as a whole.
Great idea. Okay, now if people want to reach out and help or learn more about DanceInColor, the best route is?
DanceInColor.com.
Well, congratulations, Adrian. I mean, it's incredibly inspiring in so many ways, not just to watch you perform, but to see what you're doing for future dancers as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Good. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.